Everybody, thanks for watching. Now, we always talk to Christians and Bible believers and tell them that the Bible basically stole from Kemet. The people who created the Bible went to Kemet and they basically plagiarized the Egyptian mythology, Greek mythology, astrology, and put it all into the Bible. That the Bible is parabolized, and what it's really speaking on is basically consciousness and everything like that. We talk about this till we red in the face, to be blue in the face, and we can't seem to get them to realize exactly what we mean. It's easy to say that they stole it from Kemet, but you have to really show people, those who are willing to listen, exactly what we mean by that. And that's basically what we're going to get into in this video. It's a lot that they stole from Kemet. So it's definitely, I can't put it all into one video. So this definitely going to be part one. And we're going to get into probably 2 parts, 3 parts of a lot of the really important things that they stole from Kemet that's really easy to trace back to Kemet that we know for sure was there long before we get our Bible. So we're going to get into this information, and hopefully it can kind of get people who are trying to really understand what we're talking about and the things that we point to understand, that this is where the stuff comes from. This is what it's really talking about. It's all allegorical. The stuff is not backed up by proven history, the Bible. And this is why the Bible requires faith. So we're going to get into this. We're going to take a look at a couple of things. And it's going to take up a lot of time to really get my point across on this, which is why I got to break it down into multiple videos, because it's a lot to explain. Can't really just point to Kemet and say they took it from here. It's it's a lot that it involves, and anybody who has dealt with this subject and has studied this stuff understands what I'm talking about. So we're going to get into it, and we're going to start with Genesis, the first chapter. I mean, as soon as you get into Genesis, we can see, what's going on. Now, when you get into the first chapter of Genesis chapter 1, is obviously some flaws there. A lot of times when people read the Bible and they see stuff that goes against common sense and logic, they will, dismiss it as, it's God. God is all powerful. It must make sense in some kind of way that I don't understand because it's in the Bible. So a lot of things that is common sense to most people, a lot of religious people will look at it and just, say, oh, well, and keep on going, not understanding that it's a major flaw in the book. So when you look at the first chapter of Genesis, there's some clear flaws in it. So when you read Genesis 1:5, it says, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night, and the evening and the morning was the first day. Genesis 1:8 says, and God called the firmament heaven, and the evening and the morning was the second day. Genesis 1:11 says, God created the grass, herbs, fruit trees. Genesis 1:13 says, the evening and the morning was the third day. Now, you have 3 days past, 3 days come into existence, I should say. And you have the creation of trees, fruit trees, grass, and what have you. You have 3 days that God calls evening and morning. But all of this happens before God creates the sun, which he doesn't create until Genesis 1:16. So common sense would tell you we cannot have an evening and a day without a sun and a moon. I know to religious people that may be possible. It's God. God can do anything. But to people with common sense who looking at this book, they would say, well, there's no damn way you can have evening and morning without a sun and a moon. But on top of that, how the hell is he creating grass and fruit trees and trees without a sun? Knowing that plants, survive through, photosynthesis, through absorbing the sun's light. So most people will look at that and say, well, it doesn't fit, but, it's in the Bible, and move on with it. And it's a major flaw in the book. Now, if you read Genesis 1:3, where it says, and God said, let there be light. Most people with common sense would think that, when it says, let there be light, that it's talking about God creating the sun, or God speaking into existence the sun. But we see that's not the case, because the sun is not made until Genesis 1:16 later. Now, one of the reasons why they didn't put it as God speaking the sun into existence, because then it would be even more clear that, it was stolen from Egyptian mythology. And we're going to get into that, but you can see why they had to switch it. Now, understand, like, God is speaking things into existence all throughout Genesis. When it gets to the sun, you have the narrator basically comes in and says, well, and God created two great lights or what have you. And then it's not God speaking it into existence. You got to understand why they did that. And if you don't study the ancient Egyptian creation story, you wouldn't get that. And we're going to take a look at it and see exactly what it's talking about. Now, ancient Kemet has different creation stories, and it's either told different ways, basically about the same stuff. But, we're going to go and look at just the Memphite creation story, because then you have a creator God there by the name of Ptah. So we're just going to look at the Memphite creation story. We're going to really touch on the other versions that don't involve Ptah. But when you pay attention to it, it's basically, really talking about the same stuff. And it's all Egyptian mythology, regardless of how you take it. But you have to still understand that this stuff existed before your Bible. And that's a proven fact. We don't have to speculate on it. It's proven. It's written in stone. So we're going to take a look at Memphite theology, or the Memphite creation story, and see what it's talking about as far as this creation. So then you can understand, where this stuff is taken from. So I'm going to read here. It says, there took shape in the heart. There took shape on the tongue, the form of a tomb. For the very great one is Ptah, who gave life to all the gods and their Kas, through this heart and through this tongue. And for every word of the God came about through what the heart devised and the tongue commanded. Now, in Genesis, we can see God speaking things into existence. So again, when you look at Genesis 1:3, when God said, let there be light, you would assume he was creating the sun, even though it didn't happen until Genesis 1:16. So now you have basically Ptah speaking things into existence as well. And the thing is, as I said, you have the narrator basically explain that God created two great lights, the greater to rule the day, the lesser to rule the night. Now, the Bible never says, one, that God created the sun, and it's one of the reasons why they don't really want to touch on the sun in the first chapter, because it gives away too much. It gives away a lot. And when you look at the Memphite creation story, or just the older creation stories of Kemet, you can see that basically, what the sun is. For the very great one is Ptah. A tomb is basically what he spoke into existence. And Atum, or Atum Re, or Atum Ra, is the sun. So this is why they didn't want to really make that connection. But if you really pay attention in chapter 1, it's never said specifically that God created the sun. We assume that God created the sun and the moon because it's talking about two great lights, and common sense will tell you that the two great lights has to be the sun and the moon. But since it's not specifically saying that he created specifically the sun and the moon, we assume that in chapter 1. I mean, it's made more clear later on. So you would assume that since he's speaking everything into existence, he spoke into existence as well, the sun and the moon. That would basically parallel it exactly with the creation story of Memphite theology and Memphite creation story. And you will see you have the creator God, Ptah, speaking things into existence, and he spoke the sun, Atum Ra or Atum Re. Either way, it's the sun. He spoke it into existence. Now, the Egyptians venerated the sun and many other things. So they ascribed a lot of these things human form. So it would be more easy to understand and for people to teach more about it when you put it in human form. So they did that with animals as well. They put a lot of things in animal form so you can understand it. So when you look at the sun, you had different representations of the sun. So we can look at the scarab beetle or the dung beetle, and it is also a representation of the sun because the dung beetle basically it flies at noon, always flies at noon. It always flies when the sun is at its hottest. And the dung beetle rolls the ball, a perfect sphere, across the ground, symbolizing the sun moving across the sky. And it's a symbolic of rebirth because the dung beetle lays eggs inside of the dung. And later you have a beetle come out. So they call the dung beetle the self-creator. It's the same thing with the sun. You have the sun eventually dies at night and it's reborn during the day. So they ascribed it, to the dung beetle as well, because it represents the sun a lot. But not just that, even when you just look at the creation story, our creation story about rebirth and how the sun came into existence. So you had basically, the Big Bang. And a lot of people talk about the Big Bang and don't understand it's supposed to be two Big Bangs. You had the first Big Bang that brought the universe into existence, and the second one that brought our solar system into existence. So when you look at the Bible, it's already kind of flawed right there, because everybody's expecting the beginning of creation to take place in Genesis. But really, in real life, the universe existed billions of years before the earth was came into existence, before it was created. So when you look at what science tells us, is you had a supernova, which is basically a sun exploding that created this solar system. And after the explosion, you basically had the sun reform out of this explosion. So you had rebirth with the sun recreating itself as a self-creator. This is something that you will see a lot in Egyptian mythology. And they really venerated a lot of things that symbolize self-creation. And the dung beetle is definitely one that they use a lot. And it's a self-creator. It symbolizes rebirth. If you even go back to the other Egyptian creation stories, you have Atum, which in the dynasties, they call Atum the self-creator, because there is no Ptah in all of the creation stories in Kemet. You have Atum being a self-creator coming into existence, creating himself. So still a representation of the sun, as I explained. So you have Atum being represented as the sun. You have the dung beetle being represented as the sun. And there are many other things as well. So to get people to try to understand clearly that when you see animals or insects being represented in Kemet, you have to pay attention and to their attributes and what they do, and understand how the Egyptians took these things and ascribed it to things in nature. So one of the things I really want people to start doing, those who are willing to actually do the research, is to just pay attention to what science is telling us into common sense. This video is obviously not for people who are stuck in their ways about the Bible. Some people don't want to change what they believe. Some people are fine with what they think, not what they know. But we have been telling people, Jesus is the Son. God is the Son. That's basically what they're talking about in the Bible. I mean, science tells us that the earth is basically 4.5 billion years old. So that already just wipes out the Bible right there as far as the creation timeline. If you have an older Bible printed before the 1940s, I think 1952 is when they stopped putting that in the back of the book, the timeline of the chapters, the books in the Bible. So you have Genesis basically being created between 4000 BCE and 1600 BCE, I believe it is. So that's, 6,000 years ago. So when we say that, the Bible has the world being created only 6,000 years ago, we have trees older than 6,000 years. So we know it's not true. This is stuff that you really have to pay attention to and understand. The Bible does not fit in the proven timeline of the planet. I mean, that should be enough for you right there. I mean, that's just common sense stuff. But, getting back to the sun, as I was saying, you have rebirth with the dung beetle, rebirth with the sun. Jesus is the sun. Jesus died and is basically reborn. If you take God as being the sun, he basically comes through the womb of Mary. So he is basically it's rebirth. It's all symbolizing rebirth and the rebirth of the sun. Mary giving birth to Jesus, Jesus dying and coming back just like the sun does during the winter solstice, gone for 3 days, comes back again. You guys have seen all this stuff, Zeitgeist or whatever you've seen it on, but it's all stuff that's trying to tell you that Jesus is simply the sun, that the sun was revered, in ancient times. And you look at every ancient civilization, they worshiped the sun because they understood the power of the sun. I put out a video on why, the sun was called God. And it's just things that you have to look at if you are willing to use common sense and see that it's basically talking about the sun. But, we're going to keep going because I can understand that people need a little bit more proof coming from their own book. So we're going to go into this thing. And I'm telling you, I haven't even gotten to the really damning information. We're not done with Genesis chapter 1 because it's just major pieces that we can see, where they stole it from.